support corporations on both sides of the economic equation. Poor and middle class provide the labor for goods and services, working for low pay. At the same time, the poor and middle class buy these goods and services with their cash. Corporations need to be humble. Without poor and middle class, they will crumble. Homeless families on the street, no food to eat. Their babies crying from hunger, where's relief? Jesus Christ said about the least of these, what you do to them, you do to him. Corrupt capitalists, this is their mission. Capitalism, the capitalistic system. BGMG, we on a mission to do something about this capitalistic system. BGMG, we on a mission to do something about this capitalistic system. BGMG, we on a mission to do something about this capitalistic system. BGMG, we on a mission to do something about this capitalistic system. Capitalistic system. BGMGproductions.com. B Goines and M Goines. Welcome to Political Facts with Byron Goines
and Michelle Goines.
The song you heard is entitled Capitalistic System and is available to purchase at bgmgproductions.com. We're on a mission to educate and inform our listeners on everything concerning politics that they will not hear through any other media. This is broadcast number 1 of 2 consecutive broadcasts dedicated to explaining the truth about capitalism. This lecture is available in its entirety for purchase at bgmgproductions.com. Let's get into part 1 of the lecture. The topic for today's lecture is the truth about capitalism. Concerning capitalism, the economic system in the United States is regulated capitalism, which is in need of heavier regulation to bring about fairness, where corporations cannot run roughshod over the poor and middle class. As regulated capitalism in the United States stands in its current form, the poor and middle class are at the mercy of the corporations. If this is what regulated capitalism does for the poor and middle class in the United States, thank God that laissez-faire capitalism, or in other words, free market capitalism, does not exist in the United States. And I'll prove this fact as we proceed through the lecture. Merriam-Webster's online dictionary defines capitalism as an economic system characterized by private or corporate ownership of capital goods, by investments that are determined by private decision, and by prices, production, and the distribution of goods that are determined mainly by competition in a free market. One of the best definitions for capitalism is in Collins' online dictionary and reads as follows. Capitalism is an economic and political system in which property, business, and industry are owned by private individuals and not by the state. Merriam-Webster's online dictionary defines free market as an economy operating by free competition. One of the best definitions for free market is in Collins' online dictionary and reads as follows. An economic system in which business organizations decide things such as prices and wages and are not controlled by the government. In other words, the definition of capitalism is referring to a phrase utilized by capitalists around the world, and the phrase is laissez-faire capitalism, or in other words, free market capitalism, which are both referring to an economic system consisting of private or corporate operation and is against government interference. Laissez-faire is a French term for let it be, which in and of itself is self-explanatory. In other words, do not touch it, do not mess with it, do not bother it. Laissez-faire capitalism means that government is to let the free market do as it chooses. Government is not to touch the free market. Government is not to mess with the free market. Government is not to bother the free market. Government is to stay out of the free market according to the meaning of laissez faire, which does not allow for even a minimum amount of government interference according to the meaning of laissez faire. Laissez faire are the wrong words to use as a prefix to capitalism when there is even a minimum amount of government interference concerning capitalism. When there is even a minimum amount of government interference, it is regulated capitalism. In the instance of Merriam-Webster's online dictionary definitions for laissez faire, the first definition is only partly correct concerning laissez faire, because when one studies the roots of the term, it is clear that laissez faire is total and complete freedom from any government interference in capitalism. Now, Merriam-Webster's online dictionary's definition number 2 for laissez faire is correct as it relates to the meaning of laissez faire. But before I cover the definitions, let's look at Merriam-Webster's online dictionary's history and etymology for laissez faire, which reads as follows. French laissez faire, imperative of laissez faire, to let people do as they choose. According to Merriam-Webster's history and etymology for laissez faire, it backs up what I just stated about laissez faire. Let people do as they choose is self-exclamatory. There is no regulation. Let people do as they choose means let people do as they choose. As I stated earlier, do not touch it, do not mess with it, do not bother it. Laissez-faire capitalism means that government is to let the free market do as it chooses. Government is not to touch the free market. Government is not to mess with the free market. Government is not to bother the free market. Out of the two definitions that Merriam-Webster's online dictionary has listed for laissez-faire, the first definition contradicts the history and etymology for laissez-faire, which I just covered. The first part of definition number 1 is right, but the second part of definition number 1 is wrong. Merriam-Webster's online dictionary defines laissez-faire in definition number 1 as a doctrine opposing governmental interference in economic affairs beyond the minimum necessary for the maintenance of peace and property rights. Merriam-Webster's online dictionary is right concerning the first part of the definition, which states a doctrine opposing governmental interference in economic affairs. Laissez-faire capitalism means that government is to let the free market do as it chooses. Government is not to touch the free market. Government is not to mess with the free market. Government is not to bother the free market. The second part of definition number 1 is incorrect, because with laissez-faire, there is no government interference. So to say a minimum amount of government interference is incorrect. Merriam-Webster's online dictionary defines laissez-faire in definition number 2 as a philosophy or practice characterized by a usually deliberate abstention from direction or interference, especially with individual freedom of choice and action. Now, Merriam-Webster's online dictionary's definition number 2 for laissez-faire as a philosophy or practice characterized by a usually deliberate abstention from direction or interference, especially with individual freedom of choice and action, is a definition for laissez-faire that could use a correction. The correction I would make to definition number 2 would be to change it to where it reads as follows. A philosophy or practice characterized by an abstention from governmental direction or interference, having individual freedom of choice and action. Now, definition number 1 for laissez-faire is incorrect and should be revised to state the first part only, which reads as follows. A doctrine opposing governmental interference in economic affairs. Merriam-Webster's English language learner's definition of laissez-faire is also incorrect and reads as follows concerning economics. A policy that allows businesses to operate with very little interference from the government. This definition is also incorrect and should be revised to read as follows: a policy that allows businesses to operate with no interference from the government. Remember, laissez faire calls for no government interference in laissez faire capitalism, which is also free market capitalism. Now, I have just covered Merriam-Webster's online dictionary definitions for laissez faire. Now, by contrast, Collins' online dictionary defines laissez faire as the policy which is based on the idea that governments and the law should not interfere with business, finance, or the condition of people's working lives. This is a correct definition for laissez faire. Those who hold to the doctrine of laissez faire capitalism are against government interference. And capitalists throughout the world have this mindset. These people believe laissez faire capitalism would be beneficial to the system because of the fact there would be no government interference, and as a result would allow the system of laissez faire capitalism to operate uninhibited by government. This is the direction in which Republicans are attempting to guide the regulated system of capitalism in the United States. But it will never happen. And this explains why Republican administrations are always rolling back government regulations when they are in power. Laissez faire capitalism does not exist in the United States. And this is a good thing, because laissez faire capitalism would have unintended consequences for the free market, which I'll cover later in the lecture. Regulated capitalism is what exists in the United States. Now, even though laissez faire capitalism doesn't exist in the United States, the system of regulated capitalism in the United States benefits the rich to the detriment of the poor and middle class. The system of regulated capitalism in the United States exploits and oppresses people. As a result, corporations have run roughshod over the poor and middle class. For example, corporations have poisoned residents of communities through poisoning groundwater and waterways with wastewater, and as a result have been caught and sued, resulting in multi-million-dollar settlements for residents of those communities. Regulated capitalism is a necessity, and as I just stated, the system of capitalism that exists in the United States is regulated capitalism, and is mixed with socialism, which is covered in our lecture entitled The United States, Socialism and Regulated Capitalism, which covers the hybrid economic system of socialism and regulated capitalism that exists in the United States. Now, for the purpose of today's lecture, I'm going to cover regulated capitalism, and I'm also going to cover some history of capitalism and its ties to imperialism. First of all, let me provide proof that regulated capitalism exists in the United States, and laissez faire capitalism or free market capitalism does not exist in the United States. And I'll do this by simply addressing some of the ways the United States government directly impacts the market, thereby keeping the United States from experiencing some of the unintended consequences that would result from laissez faire capitalism. Now, the following examples irrefutably prove government-regulated capitalism in the United States. And this first example, in and of itself, debunks the theory of laissez faire capitalism or free market capitalism in the United States. The Federal Trade Commission, located online at www.ftc.gov, in the section entitled What We Do, states the following information concerning its mission: protecting consumers. The FTC protects consumers by stopping unfair, deceptive, or fraudulent practices in the marketplace. We conduct investigations, sue companies and people that violate the law, develop rules to ensure a vibrant marketplace, and educate consumers and businesses about their rights and responsibilities. We collect complaints about hundreds of issues, from data security and deceptive advertising to identity theft and do not call violations, and make them available to law enforcement agencies worldwide for follow-up. Our experienced and motivated staff uses 21st century tools to anticipate and respond to changes in the marketplace. Promoting competition. Competition in America is about price, selection, and service. It benefits consumers by keeping prices low and the quality and choice of goods and services high. By enforcing antitrust laws, the FTC helps ensure that our markets are open and free. The FTC will challenge anti-competitive mergers and business practices that could harm consumers by resulting in higher prices, lower quality, fewer choices, or reduced rates of innovation. We monitor business practices, review potential mergers, and challenge them when appropriate to ensure that the market works according to consumer preferences, not illegal practices. The strategic goals for the Federal Trade Commission are listed in a section entitled About the FTC and reads as follows. Number 1, protect consumers from unfair and deceptive practices in the marketplace. Number 2, maintain competition to promote a marketplace free from anti-competitive mergers, business practices, or public policy outcomes. Number 3, advance the FTC's performance through excellence in managing resources, human capital, and information technology. The history of the Federal Trade Commission is listed in the section entitled About the FTC under How FTC Benefits Consumer, under History of the FTC, and reads as follows. When the FTC was created in 1914, its purpose was to prevent unfair methods of competition in commerce as part of the battle to bust the trusts. Over the years, Congress passed additional laws giving the agency greater authority to police anti-competitive practices. In 1938, Congress passed a broad prohibition against unfair and deceptive acts or practices. Since then, the Commission also has been directed to administer a wide variety of other consumer protection laws, including the Telemarketing Sales Rule, the Pay-Per-Call Rule, and the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. In 1975, Congress gave the FTC the authority to adopt industry-wide trade regulation rules. Now, this information, in and of itself, proves that laissez-faire capitalism or free market capitalism does not exist in the United States. And as I stated earlier, this is a good thing. Regulated capitalism is a necessity. And even with the regulation, the system of regulated capitalism exploits and oppresses people. Republicans always talk about the free market as they roll back regulations when they're in power. But the mission of the Federal Trade Commission proves undoubtedly that laissez-faire capitalism or free market capitalism does not exist in the United States. Remember, laissez-faire calls for no government interference in laissez-faire capitalism, which is also free market capitalism. The Federal Trade Commission is a United States government regulatory agency, and the job of the Federal Trade Commission is to oversee the market, looking for corrupt corporations while working in the best interest of the consumers it works for. Because at any time, corporations could become corrupt and attempt to take advantage of consumers and the market. The United States Securities and Exchange Commission, located at www.sec.gov, under the About tab in the What We Do section, under Introduction, states the following information about the SEC. The mission of the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission is to protect investors, maintain fair, orderly, and efficient markets, and facilitate capital formation. This section further states the SEC oversees the key participants in the securities world, including securities exchanges, securities brokers and dealers, investment advisors, and mutual funds. Here, the SEC is concerned primarily with promoting the disclosure of important market-related information, maintaining fair dealing, and protecting against fraud. Now, these two examples of United States federal regulatory agencies, the Federal Trade Commission and the United States Securities and Exchange Commission, prove unequivocally that regulated capitalism exists in the United States, and laissez-faire capitalism, which is also free market capitalism, does not exist in the United States. And this is a good thing. Remember, laissez-faire calls for no government interference in laissez-faire capitalism, which is also free market capitalism. There are many United States federal government regulatory agencies, and they are needed, as United States federal government regulated capitalism is a necessity because corruption still exists under regulated capitalism, and corruption would become commonplace and widespread without regulation. For a list of United States federal government departments and agencies, visit www.usa.gov/federal-agencies. You can also visit ecfr.federalregister.gov for a National Archives and Records Administration and U.S. Government Publishing Office list of United States federal government agencies. ECFR is the acronym for Electronic Code of Federal Regulations. There are many United States government regulatory agencies, as you will see when you visit these websites. But as I stated earlier, regulated capitalism is a necessity to avoid the unintended consequences of laissez-faire capitalism, which is also free market capitalism. Now, under the system of regulated capitalism in the United States, corporations do what is in the best interest of those corporations, as corporations lobby Congress to achieve their goals, which ultimately benefit those corporations to the detriment of the poor and middle class who work for those corporations. Remember, if the system of capitalism has even a small amount of government interference, it is not laissez-faire capitalism, because laissez-faire calls for no government interference in laissez-faire capitalism, which is also free market capitalism. Remember, the economic system in the United States of America, when it comes to capitalism, consists of regulated capitalism. And because of the history of corrupt corporations, when it comes to monopolies in the United States, if laissez-faire capitalism did exist in the United States and there was no government regulation of capitalism, the system of laissez-faire capitalism would destroy itself. And I will now address the unintended consequences if laissez-faire capitalism did exist in the United States. Now, because of the fact that government-regulated capitalism exists in the United States, corporations continue to exist with the ability to compete with each other. And one corporation is not allowed to monopolize its industry and shut out any competition. Remember, laissez-faire capitalism or free market capitalism consists of competition in a free market, and laissez-faire capitalism or free market capitalism, where there can be no government interference, would enable a corporation to monopolize an industry because of the fact there would be no government interference. And as a result, that corporation would become a monopoly and would be utilizing free market capitalism or laissez-faire capitalism to benefit itself. And that corporation would have total and complete control of its industry without any competition. Laissez-faire capitalism or free market capitalism would enable corporations to monopolize their industries, and some corporations would go outside of their industries and monopolize other industries. As a result, a small amount of corporations would control the entire market with no worries about competition, because those corporate monopolies would employ all of the people, control all of the access to goods and services, and shut out all potential competitors. A small number of corporations would have total control of all industries with no worries about competition, because of the fact that there would be no government interference. This is how laissez-faire capitalism or free market capitalism would destroy itself if it did exist in the United States. Now, I have shown you the unintended consequences of laissez-faire capitalism or free market capitalism in the United States. And according to the definition of laissez-faire, monopolies would undoubtedly exist, because under laissez-faire capitalism, there would be nothing the United States government could do to curtail a corporation's ability to become a monopoly. The business sector would consist of monopolies that control industries and have rooted out competition with no worries of government repercussions for doing so. This is the reason the United States government has a history of legislation to prevent monopolies, as government regulation is necessary to keep corrupt capitalists and corporations in check. Merriam-Webster's online dictionary defines monopoly as exclusive control of a particular market that is marked by the power to control prices and exclude competition, and that especially is developed willfully rather than as the result of superior products or skill. Regulated capitalism supports competition in the market and supports workers and consumers, which is the reason the regulatory agencies in the United States government are a necessity. This is an important point to remember, as the United States consists of regulated capitalism, where the government has the ability to break up corporations that attempt to become a monopoly. As is clearly evident in United States history, as the administration of Republican President Theodore Roosevelt is known for filing antitrust lawsuits to break up monopolies for violations of antitrust legislation. As history shows that North Securities Company, owned by J.P. Morgan, was broken up, and Standard Oil, owned by John D. Rockefeller, was broken up. And these are just two monopolies out of many that Roosevelt went after. As numerous antitrust lawsuits were filed to break up monopolies for violation of antitrust legislation, corrupt corporations cannot be allowed to exist, as government regulation is a necessity, and in free market capitalism or laissez-faire capitalism, President Theodore Roosevelt would not have had the ability to go after monopolies, and no legislation would have existed to enable him to do so, because government regulation would have been totally out of the picture. In free market capitalism or laissez-faire capitalism, corporations would have the uninhibited ability to become monopolies, shut out competition, and run roughshod over their workers. Those corporations would have the uninhibited ability to pay the lowest wages possible to their workers in order to get more profit, because there would be no federal government minimum wage or state government minimum wage. And those corporations would have the uninhibited ability to not have any safety standards in their factories. Those corporations would also have the uninhibited ability to destroy the environment by dumping factory waste anywhere, because of the fact that through free market capitalism or laissez-faire capitalism, everything would be determined by private or corporate decision, and the government could not say or do anything about the private or corporate decisions made. People would have to rely totally on the ethical behavior of capitalists, many of whom could not be trusted to do the right thing, and as a result would do whatever it took to make as much profit as possible and shut out any competition. United States government regulation of capitalism is a necessity, even though when Republican administrations are in office, one of the main items on their agenda is the rolling back of regulations meant to keep corporations in check and help poor and middle-class Americans, who are the majority of the consumers of goods and services, and who are also the workers who provide the labor to produce the goods and provide the services. The poor and middle class support capitalists and their corporations on both sides of the economic equation, as they are the engine of the economy. Now, Merriam-Webster's online dictionary defines capitalist as, definition number 1, a person who has capital, especially invested in business. And this definition gives an example of this in the form of industrial capitalists. This definition is also defined broadly as a person of wealth, plutocrat. Definition number 2 is a person who favors capitalism. A plutocrat is defined as a person of wealth, and Merriam-Webster's online dictionary defines plutocracy as, definition number 1, government by the wealthy. Definition number 2, a controlling class of the wealthy. And this is what exists in the United States of America. The United States is a plutocracy and an oligarchy, and they have attempted to obfuscate it and call it a democracy. So the people of the United States don't see it. But people are waking up in what I call the 21st century Enlightenment period. The people see the government corruption that exists, and they are ready for positive change. The government of the United States is supposed to be a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, as stated by President Abraham Lincoln. But this is not the case. The government of the United States is a government of, by, and for the wealthy. And it is a controlling class of the wealthy, as stated in the definition of plutocracy. The government of the United States is also an oligarchy, as you'll see shortly when we look at its definition. Big money special interests are controlling the political process and politics in general in the United States. Politicians exist who are bought and paid for by big money special interests. As a result, they vote yes on legislation in favor of big money special interests over the will of poor and middle class people in the United States. Corporate lobbyists lobby Congress successfully to get legislation passed that will benefit them, to the detriment of poor and middle class people in the United States. Politicians pass tax cuts for the rich. As a result, campaign finance reform and lobby reform are a necessity. Merriam-Webster's online dictionary defines oligarch as a person who belongs to a small group of people who govern or control a country, business, etc. Merriam-Webster's online dictionary defines oligarchy as, definition number 1, government by the few. Definition number 2, a government in which a small group exercises control, especially for corrupt and selfish purposes. And the definition goes on to state also a group exercising such control. Definition number 3, an organization under oligarchic control. This is also what exists in the United States of America. It is a government where the few control the many, and a small group exercises control for corrupt and selfish purposes. The government of the United States is an oligarchy, as a small group of the wealthy control the masses of poor and middle class people through the utilization of big money, with which they buy politicians who have been elected by poor and middle class people who make up the majority of the voting bloc, but the politicians work against the best interests of the poor and middle class people who elected them in favor of the interests of the wealthy who financially support those politicians, in return for those politicians voting in favor of legislation that will benefit the wealthy. This is what is known as one hand washing the other politics, where big money is controlling the body politic through the means of obfuscation, making people think the United States is a democracy, when in fact it is a plutocracy and an oligarchy. Democratic principles cannot be realized in a government where big money is controlling the political process behind the scenes through corporate lobbyists and corporate donations to super PACs to help political candidates win elections, while the capitalists have poor and middle-class people on a treadmill working and going about their daily activities in the capitalist efforts to keep poor and middle-class people so preoccupied with their daily lives that they don't see what's really going on in the government. We'll stop here for today, and we'll pick it up next time on Political Facts with Byron Goines
and Michelle Goines.
Capitalism still be running things. The ignorant fell hard for the trap. Capitalism extended the wealth gap. Rich get richer, poor and middle class struggle. A system known as the capitalism hustle. Laissez, faire capitalism. Exploitation, oppression, mission. The system known as capitalism is directly tied to imperialism. Oligarchy and plutocracy is what it be. The United States is not a democracy. Big money can control a politician. The reason why is capitalism. Politicians bought and paid for with big money. Corporations and super PACs, it ain't funny. U.S. bought politicians is nothing new. Corporations lobby Congress and get through. Time for system change the way it should be. Campaign finance reform necessity. BGMG, we on a mission to do something about this capitalistic system. BGMG, we on a mission to do something about this capitalistic system. BGMG, we on a mission to do something about this capitalistic system. BGMG, we on a mission to do something about this capitalistic system. People working on jobs with low wages, they need more. Corporations refuse to pay it. They cutting wages to get more profit. Hitting poor and middle class in the pocket. The system built by and for capitalists. Using poor and middle class to pay for it. Poor and middle class support corporations on both sides of the economic equation. Poor and middle class provide the labor for goods and services working for low pay. At the same time, the poor and middle class buy these goods and services with their cash. Corporations need to be humble. Without poor and middle class, they will crumble. Homeless families on the street, no food to eat. Their babies crying from hunger, where's relief? Jesus Christ said about the least of these, what you do to them, you do to him. Corrupt capitalists, this is their mission. Capitalism, the capitalistic system. BGMG, we on a mission to do something about this capitalistic system. BGMG, we on a mission to do something about this capitalistic system. BGMG, we on a mission to do something about this capitalistic